Okay, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we have been studying an interpretation of the verse وَمَا يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا, and he who has been given wisdom has been given great good. And in the interpretation of this verse, the author started with, like, the 12th word is the interpretation that we have been studying. The first principle was making a comparison between how philosophy reads the book of universe and how prophethood reads the book of universe. So in there, the universe was being taken as a book, and he gave a nice metaphor about how an engineer who doesn't know how to read, yet a very good engineer, would consider a book. And then a person who is knowledgeable of how to read a book, then reading the book and understanding the meaning. This was the first distinction that he made. This was the first principle. And then in the second principle, so in the first principle, then he made a distinction between how to read, because this is how the first revelation started. The first revelation said, read in the name of your Lord who created. So how I read is going to make a huge difference. Now, in the second principle, he then started talking about how these different ways of reading is going to have different outcomes in life, in personal life. The first one was about the personal life. So he was talking about how a student of philosophy is going to be like a pharaoh, yet being afraid of everybody. And on the other hand, making a comparison how the student of Wahi, revelation, is going to be very humble, yet he's not going to be afraid of anybody else other than the Creator. So he made such a comparison in the second principle. And last week we studied the third principle, which was talking about the training of philosophy versus Quranic wisdom in the social life. How does it make a difference? These two approaches of reading the book of universe, how do they manifest themselves in the social life? And just a few snippets to remember what it was about. He was saying that philosophy was accepting force as its support, point of support in the society life. Like if you are strong, or as they say, might has right. But on the other hand, the Quranic wisdom was putting the point of support as truth instead of force. And there were comparisons as such. Now today, inshallah, we will start with the fourth principle, which is going to be about Qur'an's superiority among all the divine scriptures and its supremacy over all speech and writings. This is going to be today's topic, inshallah. But before getting to there, is there any comment question from past weeks that you would like to, just any question lingering in there? If not, we can start with the fourth principle. Yeah.
So when you read the ayah at the beginning, I thought, how everything we discussed so far related to the ayah, how it is the interpretation of this ayah. So in the ayah where it says, and he who has been given wisdom has been given great good, it's the khayran kasira, is that right? Okay. So, and wisdom is hikmah. So it's making a connection. I don't remember whether we talked about that or not, but if we did already, please stop me. There's a connection between hikmah, wisdom, and the higher, the goodness, or the good thing, whatever, however you want to translate. It says they are linked, meaning if what you have causing you or like leading you to goodness, and you can call it wisdom. Otherwise, what you have is not wisdom. So in the first principle, second principle, third principle so far, we made some comparisons about how we could define possibly the wisdom. Right? In the outside world that we are living in, the wisdom is usually defined around science, philosophy, arts, and so on and so forth. And if you have certain training, if you have certain titles, you are automatically considered to be a wise man or wise woman. But the ayah says, if what you have is leading you, as I said, to the goodness, then this is wisdom. And the author said, when you look at that, these alternatives, you will realize what they lead is nothing but misery. Within the personal life, if you are a student of quote unquote enlightenment, it will take you to darkness. It will take you to misery. Within the social life, if you take, again, that enlightenment, you will see it will take you the darkness of the society. So what they have is not wisdom. Is not the hikmah, is not higher. On the contrary, what Qur'an suggests takes you both in the personal life and the social life to the goodness. So you can see in your life, when you look at your life, where you are, how what state you are in, you can say that, okay, what is given to me must be hikmah, must be wisdom. And I'm glad that I'm given that because it is related to goodness in my life. When I read my, let's say, family relationship in the light of Qur'an, when I try to understand my fight with my children, let's say, from a Quranic perspective, as we discussed last week, it takes me to what? Goodness. It takes me the truth. But if you take it from, let's say, again, quote unquote, a psychological perspective as it is being taught, right? I don't have anything against the psychology, but just for this is part of my profession. So I don't have anything against that. But the way they teach you, when you look at it, it takes you to what? The clash of forces. You find yourself in the middle of, the forces acting each other like the clashing, and you are squashed in between. It takes you nothing but misery again. So I think this is at least one way. All these things that we discussed so far, it's a really nice interpretation of this ayah.
And another point that we mentioned about this, just to remind about it, since the verse is mentioning it as given, whomever given wisdom, not like whomever finds wisdom, but whomever is given. Yeah, whomever attains. It's not like that, but it is more in the passive, saying that whomever is given wisdom is given great good, because in the approach of philosophy, and philosophy in here is used in its larger sense of sciences today, we say we are conquering the nature. We find it. Like we have it and it's now ours. We are exerting our authority over the nature. So in this attitude, whatever you find as wisdom is not given to you as wisdom, but you build that wisdom. Hence, it's being the source of darkness, practically speaking. Of course, we are taking a lot of shortcuts in this intro summary, but inshallah, let's go with the fourth principle. Otherwise, what Brother Birkan said could also be, since Sister Sarah is not here today, otherwise she would ask a question saying that, shall I ask for a question?
It's your question, obviously, but
So, I mean, today I was talking to someone who was so much fed up with the version of Islam in his country that, like, he was just saying, well, I mean, if this is wisdom, if this is truth, I mean, come on. So, then practically speaking, of course, what you are saying is within the framework of these discussions makes sense, but I guess a first time hearer might take us to be very exaggerated of a saying. But if since Sister Sarah is not here and she's not asking that question, we can shelve the question. But otherwise, that would have been a question that my friend today would have asked.
I think that's a really good question to open up the discussion. So when we look at our like an actual life, the way we live it, with your words, the practical life, we do see the knowledge or wisdom as being marketed in academia and the social media and whatever, is nothing but the source of misery. We see that practically. So, like when you attain, as you said, more and more wisdom or more and more knowledge, your relationship with other people starts cracking. I know this, they don't know that. How dare they can, think this way? These ignorant people. So this happens to almost everybody. So the knowledge, as you, again, gain and accumulate more and more, we see that it causes you to in a place that you feel alone. Nobody understands you because you know everything, but no one else. And they are so ignorant. And with your family life, for instance, when you take such a stance, you know something, but not your wife, you are in a big trouble. Like when you think it that way. The opposite, not that, dangerous. But anyway, when you look at your personal life or the social life, as they say, the ignorance is bliss. Because knowing is just a curse, right? You do it, you have to do it sometimes to gain money and so on, like as your profession and so on, for its benefits. But at the same time, you know that it's not, it's so heavy to know something.
But I guess the point in here is more so that if you are talking about the practical outcomes of it, then the practical outcomes of what's supposed to be the students of Qur'an, look all those countries around the world and whatnot. So where do we see the application of what is being claimed in here? Because you do not just claim it in the vacuum. So it has to, since this is a guidance for human being, it has to have some sort of tangible outcomes in human life so that we talk about it in humans' personal life, human social life. But I guess, I mean, a very quick answer that I have for this one is, like all those ideologies that are out there for centuries for humanity, at the very least, to talk about it, the way Quran suggested has been implemented, if nothing else, for the time of the Prophet, if nothing else. So much so that this age was called Age of Bliss. So, like in no other ideology, we see a age of bliss among humanity. But of course, not only for a 30-year of life. I mean, because let's say socialism or I don't know, capitalism, no application we know of that is tangibly good for people, for all. But apart from that, then also we need to come and test it for ourselves, I guess. How does Quran remedy my problems in my personal life, in my social life? And as I'm living in a society, how much the tenets of this society treat my wounds, I guess this is going to be the way to evaluate it.
Like I would more concentrate on this second part. So I think with such the ambiguities, the answer is always, as author was like we've been discussing, was it the fifth or sixth word? The idea is you try it yourself, you test it. If you like it, take it. So the moments in my life, in my actual life, when I look at the things, let's say my relationship with my children or my wife, let's say, from a Quranic perspective, when I look at it from this perspective, I find happiness.
Agreed. But again, without Prophet, we cannot talk about it in the vacuum. This is why I think we had to bring in the messenger so that we see an application of it. Otherwise, always what comes to mind is which interpretation of Quran you are talking about. But anyways, I would say let's go with fourth principle. Otherwise, it's going to be a dialogue between two of us only. So we put people into the conversation. So let's start with fourth principle. Now that our moderator is also here, I can pass the microphone to her. You didn't miss anything. No, you got it. He's not ready. Yes, for. So it's going to be fourth principle. And you can pick up somebody to read immediately. Okay, we have somebody to read here. Fourth principle.
Right. If you want to understand the Quran's superiority among all the divine scriptures and its supremacy over all speech and writings, then consider the following two comparisons. The first, a king has two forms of speech, two forms of address. One is to speak on his private telephone with a common subject concerning some minor matter, some private need. The other, under the title of sublime sovereignty, supreme vicegerent, and universal rulership, is to speak with an envoy or a high official for the purpose of making known and promulgating his commands, to make an utterance through an elevated decree, proclaiming his majesty. The second, one man holds the mirror he is holding up to the sun. He receives light containing the 7 colors according to the capacity of the mirror. He becomes connected to the sun through that relation and converses with it. And if he directs the light-filled mirror towards his dark house or his garden covered by a roof, he will benefit not in relation to the sun's value, but in accordance with the capacity of the mirror. Another man, however, opens up broad windows out of his house or out of the roof over his garden. He opens up ways to the sun in the sky. He converses with the perpetual light of the actual sun and speaks with it and says in gratitude through the tongue of his disposition, O you beauty of the world, who gilds the face of the earth with your light and makes the faces of flowers smile. O beauty of the skies, fine sun, you have furnished my little house and garden with light and heat the same way as you have them. Whereas the man with the mirror cannot say that, the reflection and the works of the sun under that restriction are limited. They are in accordance with the restriction. Look at the Quran through the telescope of these two comparisons and see its miraculousness and understand its sacredness. The Quran says, if all the trees on the land were to become pens, and all the seas ink, and if they were to write the word of Almighty God, they would never come to the end of them. Now, the reason the Quran has been given the highest rank among the infinite words of God is this. The Quran has come from the greatest divine name and from the greatest level of every name. It is God's word in respect of his being sustainer of all the worlds. It is his decree through his title of God of all beings, an address in regard to his being creator of the heavens and the earth, a conversation in regard to absolute dominicality, a pre-eternal address on account of universal divine sovereignty, a notebook of the favors of the most merciful one from the point of view of his all-embracing comprehensive mercy, a collection of communications at the beginnings of which are sometimes ciphers related to sublime majesty of the Godhead, A wisdom scattering holy scripture, which, descending from the reaches of the greatest name, looks to and inspects all the comprehensive domain of the supreme throne. It is for these reasons that the title of Word of God has been given with complete worthiness to the Quran. In respect to the other divine words, they are speech which has become evident through a particular regard, a minor title through the partial manifestation of a particular name, through a particular dominicality, special sovereignty, a private mercy. Their degrees vary in regard to particularity and universality. Most inspiration is of this sort, but its degrees vary greatly. For example, the most particular and simple is the inspiration of the animals. Then there is the inspiration of the ordinary people. Then the inspiration of the ordinary angels. Then the inspiration of the saints. Then the inspiration of the higher angels. Thus, it is for this reason that a saint who offers supplications directly without means, by the telephone of my heart says, my heart tells me news of my sustainer. He does not say, it tells me of the sustainer of all the words. And he says, my heart is the mirror, the throne of my sustainer. He does not say, it is the throne of the sustainer of all the worlds. For he can manifest the address to the extent of its capacity, and to degree nearly 70,000 veils have been raised. Thus, however much higher and more elevated is the decree of a king promulgated in respect of his supreme sovereignty than the insignificant speech of a common man, and however much more abundantly the effulgence of the sun in the sky may be benefited from than the manifestation of its reflection in the mirror, and however greater is its superiority to that degree of the Quran of mighty stature is superior to all other speech and other books. After the Quran, at the second level, the holy books and revealed scriptures have superiority according to their degree. They have their share from the mystery of that superiority. If all the fine words of all men and jinn which do not issue from the Quran were to be gathered together, they still could not attain to the sacred rank of the Quran and imitate it. If you want to understand a little of how the Quran comes from the greatest name and from the greatest level of every name, consider the universal, elevated statements of Ayatul Kursi and the following verses. And with him are the keys of the unseen. O God, Lord of all dominion, he draws the night as a veil over day, each seeking the other in rapid succession. He created the sun, the moon, and the stars, all subject to his command. O earth, swallow up your water. O sky, withhold your rain. The heavens and the earth and all within them extol and glorify him. The creation of you all and the resurrection of you all is but like that of a single soul. We did indeed offer the trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains. The day that we roll up the heavens like a scroll rolled up for books. No, just estimate have they made of God, such as is due to him on the day of judgment. The whole of the earth will be but his handful. Had we sent down this Quran on a mountain, you would indeed have seen it humble itself and cleave asunder for fear of God. And study the surahs which begin Alhamdulillah or Tasabbihu and see the rays of the mighty mystery. Look to at the openings of the Alif Lam Memes and the Alif Lam Ras and the Ha Memes and understand the Quran's importance in the sight of God. If you have understood the valuable mystery of this fourth principle, you have understood that revelation mostly comes to the prophets by means of an angel, and inspiration is mostly without means. You will have also understood the reason why the greatest saint cannot attain to the level of a prophet, and you will have understood to the Quran's sublimity and its sacred grandeur and the mystery of its elevated miraculousness. So to you will have understood the mystery of the necessity of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ascension, that is, that he went to the heavens to the furthest Lord tree, to the distance of 2 bow lengths, offered supplications to the all glorious one, who is closer to him than his jugular vein, and in the twinkling of an eye returned whence he came. Indeed, just as the splitting of the moon was a miracle of his messengership, whereby he demonstrated his prophethood to the jinn and the mankind, so the ascension was a miracle of his worship and servitude to God, whereby he demonstrated to the spirits and angels that he was God's beloved. O God, grant blessings and peace to him and his family as befits your mercy and in veneration of him. Amen.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much for that wonderful reading. I'm sure you guys have done a summary of past week's discussions already, right? But just as a reminder, the trajectory of this 12th word has been comparing the wisdoms of the Quran as opposed to what philosophy offers, right? Or various other ideologies offer, both in terms of personal life, social life, and now in this fourth principle, talking about what elevates the Quran beyond both other sort of divine speeches, right? Divine addressees, let's say, as well as just any other speech. But anything just to begin and to give myself time to think as well. Anything that kind of jumps out at you in this fourth principle while listening or reading. Perhaps something like a sentence that seems interesting or confusing. I'll just let anyone who wants to voice something, or if you have something you'd like to say as well. So first, I guess, do we understand that you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
So I think what stood out to me the most was how the author relates all the divine names, and he talks about some of them and how the Quran is an embodiment of all those names and all those attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how it manifests all of those things into this one book. I think that's the thing that stood out the most to me.
Yeah, Brother Yusuf.
So in between the lines, he referred to the verse which says, if the trees were to become pens and all the sea is ink, if they were to write the words of Almighty God, they would never come to the end of them. So this is really framing our understanding of speech of God in general. What is not speech of God simply? This simply becomes almost like that, because everything in the existence is a speech of the Creator. This is, I think we referred to this in the previous weeks as well, but one can see the creation as an artwork. Like if you go to Philadelphia Museum of Arts, you see the artwork of artists in there, but they are static arts in there. Like the artist is dead long ago. So they painted art. Still, you can appreciate the artist, but the artist is distant. But if you see the speech of the artist, then speech is a dynamic thing. It's renewing, and you know that the speaker is right there. Even if you don't see the speaker, you do hear the speech, meaning that the speaker is alive, speaker is still speaking to you right now. So seeing the existence as speech of the Creator makes a big difference. And now seeing the existence as speech of God, then that means there are various speeches of the Creator. This is where now he says, where does Qur'an get located in this harmony of speeches out there?
And again, the author follows this example: if all the trees on land were to become pens and all the seas ink, by, like, my understanding of it is that, like, men can write. Again, if you're trying to interpret art, you can do it, but you will never interpret it or understand it as the artist who actually made it. And the same thing that the author says here, that again, you might be able to write a book, but you won't be able to write the book about this world as the sustainer of all the worlds. You won't be able to write it as the God of all beings. And it just, like, that's a perspective that even if all the humans and the jinn combine, they cannot reach that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that relates a lot to what stood out to me the most. And I think it's maybe the one thing I understood the best, which was the analogy with the mirror. So you can use the mirror to reflect the sun into your garden, or you can just open the roof and let the actual sun shine through. So I would just love to talk more about it and what the mirror represents, because I think I have an idea, like you have this man-made thing and you can try your best to mimic the word of God and interpret it, but there's nothing better than interacting directly with it. And I think the author just say that like you're talking directly to the sun, so the source. And yeah.
So how do we understand that example further? Right?
So yeah.
So, yeah, let's go. Yeah.
I just have a question, like how do we understand the comparisons, like what the author is trying to make? Because like here it says it's a private telephone line with a common subject. So I would want that with my creator. So are we saying like what is the comparison? Like do both of these exist, or are we just taking the second one? Like what is the meaning of this comparison and why like the author has put it that way? Because how we've been reading and how we've understood Quran is like it is a personal message to every single human being that is created, and it is a message from the sustainer. So how, like what is the meaning of this comparison, if someone could shed light on that?
I think that's a really important question. And for I let others speak, just one thing that comes to mind is, as Brother Yusuf said, like everything in creation I have to take as a form of speech, right? And not even like sometimes we say like book of the universe or that sort of phrase terminology is thrown around, but more accurately like speech of the universe, because a book is static. There's a sort of distance there. It's written, predetermined, right? But a speech, as he said, is dynamic. There's a intimacy there, imminent. I am the direct addressee of it. So, I might have, when I think of all of creation as a speech, that includes both, the trees, the leaves, right? The immediate rain that comes, like as we were coming here, like suddenly there was a immense rainfall, right? Now I have to take that as speech, not just as, oh, notification of flash flood because, something happened. And no, that is being created for me in that very moment, right? So within the conditions of my own life, whatever I might experience, that is direct speech for me. Even the emotions that I find within myself, the state of beings that I find within myself, that is creation, and all of creation is speech, right? So in one sense, how I'm understanding it is that I am being directly addressed in many forms and constantly throughout my life, right? By the one who's creating me. But then the Quran, it says is the universal addressee, right? So it's not just my creator addressing me, but the one who's also creating, Natalia, right? The one who's also creating Atik, the one who's also creating everything else that I interact with, everyone other. Could be. All right. So there's a sort of there's a degree of for lack of better wording, like prowess almost, like, oh, like the one who is the authority of all of this existence is addressing me both intimately and also through this title as sustainer of all the worlds, because that's also what grabbed my attention here. It said the Quran, let me just find it for a moment, and someone else had mentioned it, I think, anyway, but where is it? Yeah, I mean, it says, I can't find it in this very moment, but the speaker, right, as being the sustainer of all the worlds, right? It is God's word in respect of his being sustainer of all the worlds. So those are just initial thoughts that come to mind, but any other thoughts on how we can understand these two different kinds of addressees, right? Like because that was going to be my initial question as well. Like, do we understand this comparison that's given? One in terms of a private telephone with a common subject, a private need, right? And then the other as under universal rulership, right? For the purpose of making known, promulgating his commands through this elevated decree, proclaiming his majesty. Yeah. I'll give mine.
So not being afraid to be wrong, but this reminds me a lot of how the Quran is a universal let's call it speech, right? So it kind of unites us as an ummah. It tells us, what we should do, but also Qur'an has all the answers to all of our problems, one way or another, and those problems are individual. So we can see, and I just came up with the idea of the Qur'an being that, but the speech of God in general can be individual for yourself. So in that way, a telephone, a connection between you and your Lord, you and your Creator. But again, it can also be universal in the sense that it's talking to me, but it's also for everyone, and everyone can, again, benefit from it. I'm thinking of like commandments, like his actual commandments for us to do as an ummah, as believers, but also as a way for us to find solutions to all of our individual problems.
Jazakallah khair. Any other thoughts? Dua? No? Brother Yusuf?
So, to go through the maybe metaphors, what the author is saying here. So, like in the first metaphor, he was comparing a king. A king has two forms of speech. It is the same king, but the first type of speech is he calls Qadir, like, and says, Qadir, I heard that you have some special need. You need to go through some surgery and your health care is not good. So, okay, I covered you. Go to this hospital, get your surgery. This is one type of king talking to Qadir. And the other one is king declares a major speech to everybody, but now he is speaking as the king of the whole country. So his statement is not only specific to when the king talks to Qadir, king is talking to Qadir saying that I am your king. But now in the second type of speech, the king is speaking as the king of the East and West. Like within that authority, the king is speaking. So what would be the difference between the two? Which one of these speeches would be more lovely to us? The first one would be more lovely to us, is it? So is it because it's more intimate? Because there's more intimacy in there. But how about the second speech? Like the king is, it's going to be the king talking, but now there the speech is coming from differs. Speech is coming from the same king, but from my point of view, how I'm going to interpret the speech is going to change. Like take it this way, if let's say, since here we have students, there is a president of the university let's go with the president of the university. And president of university is at the same time your PhD advisor. Like you have a personal relationship with the guy as well. So when he texts you after the day and says, well, let's go and grab some lunch somewhere. This is a personal speech of this president to you. But also, president sometimes talks to you and says that we are going to raise the, salaries, or this is how we are going to change a certain thing. But now the speech is coming from the same mouth, but the authority of that speech is way different. So how do we, why did the author use this sort of a two example for Quran? Where does Quran fit in this picture, for instance? Which one sounds more like Quran? Let me pose the question as such. And if Quran is one, then what is the other one? Also, it's going to be the follow-up question. Okay, let's, Zarin is there.
I guess to me, both seem necessary, like in terms of looking at the Quranic speech. Like I would want a speech that feels more intimate and feels like it's addressing like my day-to-day problems rather than something far away that I can't necessarily reach. But at the same time, I feel like in this example, the intimacy comes from like that feeling comes from the fact that the king or this like person with like high authority is speaking to someone like me. So that sense of like, I guess that difference in like power, I guess, also makes it feel more like, oh, someone like this is talking to and advising me. So I feel like the title, the authority is also like necessary for me to like trust, like even if it's intimate like speech or like it's like addressing me specifically, I feel like I also need to be able to build this sort of like trust with it. Like it has to like it needs to have like something that I can like trust and like want to listen further. So I think both for me, I guess I feel like both like types of speech are necessary, but I do understand why the first one would be more like appealing.
I'm also thinking that perhaps it's necessary that the speech feels intimate, in the sense that, for example, you are the king's friend, right? And you have been going through some tough time in your life. And the king makes an address to all of the country, and the king says, I know that a lot of you are going through tough times. You will feel like the king is talking about you because you have that relationship with the king. I feel in the same way, even when God is addressing everyone, it is necessary that we feel that intimate connection because we know that He knows us and He knows what we've been doing and what we've been up to. So I think in that way, it just has to be that way.
One example comes to my mind about the first metaphor or the question that the way you raised. Like you have a computer and there's an issue. Let's say it's an Apple computer. You have an issue, you're trying to solve something, and the guy comes and solves your problem. He says, oh, you need to press these buttons and it is solved. So you can take it. This like you can take the guy. So you can take the guy as just a technician, right? But if the guy is, does anyone know who's Wozniak? He's like he's the first engineer of the Apple, like who built the original computer. Like if your technician is the Wozniak, right? So it means something different now. Like he can just solve your problem and say that press these buttons. This is one speech of the God. He may also speak from a higher position and tell everything about the Apple computers. Like he knows everything. He knows every tiny circuits and so on and so forth. He built it with his hands. So when you take the speech from Wozniak, it seems it is more elevated speech. It's not just a solution of a tiny problem you have, but he's the engineer of the computer you have. So I guess, like, when we read the text in this way, like it sounds, the first one is more intimate and maybe better and so on and so forth. But to me, it sounds like, because there's also vicegerent that we didn't talk about. It's more about the level of the speech that the face. One is just a regular technician, you can take it as this way, or is the engineer of the computer that you are using. So the second one is definitely the higher level. And when you listen to it, it solves the personal problem as well. But even with your personal problem, the solution, now it's more encompassing. It's not that you press this button once and it resolves, but also when you have a similar problem, the pressing the same buttons maybe will not work this time, but because you have access to the engineer and he explains you how things works and so on and so forth, you will know what to do, what buttons to press for a similar but a different problem as well. It's a more encompassing solution to your problem.
Then can we say that for the two examples, the first example is speaking about the message from speaker's perspective, meaning relative to the speaker, one might be the personal message of the speaker to an individual, or the message of the speaker which applies to everybody. Like if the king was talking to Qadir and saying something to the Qadir, it applies to Qadir, but not necessarily to Bir Khan. But if the king was making a speech which applies to, like, as the king of the kings, if he is making such a statement, then that statement is valid for everyone in every time. Because the comparison in here is going to be your individual inspirations, which your creator speaks to you and you understand something. It's your individual understanding. And on the other hand, then there's this revelation, which is again speech of the creator, and it's going to apply to everybody in all the time, in the ways that are specific to them. But it's a speech that comes from with that authority. But in this case, what does authority mean? It applies to everywhere at every time. So the first example is for relative to the origin of the message might be of two types. But when it comes to the second metaphor, now it's about the recipient's end. Are you receiving the message through a mirror, or are you trying to receive the message without a mirror? And again, then the question that Natalia asked will come into the picture. In this metaphor, what does mirror refer to? In our life, what does it mean to receive revelation with a mirror versus without a mirror? What does that mean?
Receive speech with a mirror, right? Not the revelation. Because only the second one we would call revelation. And that was a question, not a statement.
So the way I understood it was that there's another ayah in the Holy Quran. It is Inna fi zalika liayatin liqaumin yatafakkarun. That indeed there are many signs in it for those who meditate or those who think about it. So
what is the word used for thinking?
يتفكرون.
yatafakkarun. So I was understanding it in those terms that if you, for example, just taking myself as an example, there are many ayahs of the Holy Quran that I had read before. I had read the translation before, but when I started coming into these Quran classes and we started looking into the tafsir of some of those ayahs, the meaning really changed for me. And in some cases, it even became really personal and how it was applying to my life and things that were happening with me. And I feel like if I look at how the author is talking about the mirror, I feel like the mirror was small before, and that's why my understanding was limited. But as my understanding of it increased, the mirror became a window and more light started coming in.
جزاك الله خير. Sorry.
I guess I was a bit confused because I thought that or at least from my understanding, the way to sort of understand like the creator is through sort of like the quote unquote mirrors in existence. So like for in this example, how like we're using like the sun as an example, like you can't look directly at the sun. So in order to understand like its light and its beauty, you see the light reflected in like all of like the different like things that have colors and such. So you understand the light through like the different colors, and then you understand like the qualities of the sun through like its warmth and heat. But like you can't physically go to the sun. You can't even like look at the sun. So to me, it feels like it's necessary to have like a mirror that can reflect these qualities so that we can understand them at our level. But also what drew my attention was that he becomes, so that it's this paragraph that says he becomes connected to the sun through that relation and converses with it. And if he directs the light-filled mirror towards his dark house or his garden covered by a roof, he will benefit not in relation to the sun's value, but in accordance with the capacity of the mirror. So my understanding was like, how big are the mirrors, I guess, that are reflecting maybe like the creator's like attributes to us. I don't know if that made sense, but
So let's go with Natalia, and then we'll turn to Brother Yusuf. But also maybe this goes to the heart of the question that was raised, which is what are these mirrors in our life? And as Zareen, you raised that question of like capacity, right? So what can be the capacity of anything that is within the conditions of this existence also, right?
Yeah, and Jazakallah khair, it was like your input opened up a lot about this paragraph that I think I couldn't understand before. And I just reread it. And I wonder now, after rereading it, he doesn't speak to the sun itself. He says he converses with the perpetual light of the actual sun and speaks with it. And I'm thinking of the way we see light. We don't see light itself. We see the light reflected in objects in our world. So I feel like this could be a way. I don't know what the author really meant, but it could be that there's taking the light as Allah's speech. We see his speech through actual things in the world. So not like I don't think we are able to understand it by itself, but we understand it on things. And that's just my interpretation of it. But I would love to hear more about what these mirrors are. The way I kind of understand it is that this mirror takes Allah's creation but makes it its own in a way. So a mirror reflects light, but it's only to the capacity of the mirror. I'm thinking about the quality of the reflection rather than the length, the size of the mirror. So yeah, some people can interpret Allah's word in maybe better ways, but I also think that it could be individual. So I just would love to dive deeper into it.
So before I pass it to Brother Yusuf and then the sister over here as well, I will chime in and make use of my moderator power, I guess. But thinking about this analogy, one, I think we need to recognize the limits of an analogy, right? And also see what purpose is this analogy trying to serve within the context of this principle, right, that we're reading. One thing that comes to mind is that when we think about the Qur'an, right, speech of the creator and the speech of the universe, we always talk about how they are to confirm each other, right? But also that the Qur'an is the translator of the speech of the universe. So, and in this sense, the mirror, it can't give any light if there's no sun, right? Now, I'm not sure if this is exactly how the analogy is going about, but this is how I'm going to interpret it, and Brother Yusuf can correct me. But without the translation of the Qur'an, right, the tree can be there, the fruit can be there, the baby can be there, but will I be able to receive their light? Will I be able to read them in such a way that I'm able to see the qualities of the Creator, right? So that I can say, oh, there's this quality of compassion and mercy here. I see it, I witness it, I observe it in the world, and the Quran also confirms it, right? But the Quran gives me the lens through which I can properly read or engage with the world to begin with, right? So it's essential that I recognize that the role, I guess, that this larger, let's say, dominical speech does in allowing me to then understand the other smaller intimate speeches, right? That was just one thing that came to mind. I will give the mic to you, and then afterwards, Brother Yusuf at some point.
I think the way that I interpreted these lines is that the mirrors are actually the discipline. So like, let's say chemistry or engineering or natural sciences, they offer some knowledge of Allah because, you know, as we learn more about the human body, we learn about the kind of wisdom and beauty that Allah bestowed within, you know, when he was creating us. And there's a function for things, and we can know, we can learn a lot about him, but then at the same time, there's a limit to that discipline that, you know, that's the capacity of that mirror because it doesn't allow us to have the complete picture. So I think that's the difference between using the mirrors to understand the Creator or the sun compared to, you know, having a direct experience with it ourselves.
Yeah, they give me indications almost, right? Signposts towards something. Further.
So, actually, the point that Sister Zareen raised is a very important point because this is 12th word. Author is introducing the idea to us, but once he comes to 29th word, 30th word, and as he comes to 31st word, he's going to talk about ascension in detail. He's going to revisit this example in there, and he's going to expand the same metaphor a little more. This is where it's going to start looking like how Zareen said it. And in this extended version of the same metaphor, it says there are two ways this journey can happen. The first one is one person says, I'll just put a mirror outside of my house because both people are trying to get to know the sun. One of them says, I'll put a mirror, and then however much light comes under my roof through the mirror, this is how I'm going to know the sun. And of course, this is a limited light as much as the quality of the mirror. For the second one, he says the person takes a journey. He takes out of the house. He starts climbing a mountain. And in his journey, he is seeing different colors of trees and all different creation, which are now being small mirrors. But as he climbs the mountain, he starts seeing the grandeur of how the sun is reflecting on the oranges and the plums and purple and yellow and white, all different colors being manifest. And then eventually sees the sun with naked eye. Then he comes back to the home, and then he says, opens up a window in his roof and now starts directly talking to the sun. So in this extended version of the metaphor, and since you have been attending the discussions, where does the distinction happen? So yes, in this life, we do get to know our Creator through the child that we interact with, the water that we drink. These are the mirrors with which we get to know the Creator. But these are all limited mirrors in and of themselves. So in one of them, you will see mercy of the Creator. In another one of them, you're going to see the grandeur or even sometimes the power of the Creator. When the thunder happens, more than mercy, you do see the power of the Creator in there, for example. But these are all, as you keep seeing those images, you will get to see that all of them are coming from a single source. But then what is the distinction? Now coming back to the single, like directly talking to the sun versus talking to the sun through a mirror. What is the distinction between the two here? This is the important part. So in this metaphor, when he says mirror, it is my heart. My heart is my mirror. But what does it mean? Am I not going to understand it with my heart? How can I not use my heart? What does this mean? Let's go back to the previous conversation that we have been following so far. It was always a comparison between the philosopher and the revelation. But now at the fourth, it looks like we got rid of philosophy altogether. But is it binary now? Is it that now purely we are talking about path of prophethood? Within path of prophethood, there are degrees. What that means is, you as a follower of revelation, you might say that this portion of it, I am good at understanding this. Like I am a believer, thoroughly I believe about the creator. But I might be feeling like, oh, I am a merciful, soft-hearted person. This is how I define myself. Or I might define myself as, I have an artistic taste. I am good at, with the grace of my creator, I understand art better. So as much as I start attributing partially these to myself, I am sort of becoming this dark mirror. Whatever I see on that mirror, I will attribute to my creator. But I limited it. What does it mean then to understand it from the creator without any mirror? It is to say that what I say as I have a talent in art, who is I in there? Like, is there anything that I own in there inherently? Or even when I say I am talented in art, is even a manifestation of him. To the extent that I can see everything comes from him, then no mirror is left. Everything becomes his speech. Because mirror is a static, limiting, alien object in there. And this is where my ego gets in between. And I say, and he mentioned saints. Like what I'm talking about is, this is some, like, it's not that, oh, you're arrogant. I'm not talking about that type of arrogant, egotistical person. He's talking about saints here, but saying that for every person, you have this tendency to say that I know this much of it, or I am good at this, or even if somehow I am giving a share to myself, this becomes my static mirror. And because of the staticness of this mirror, I am limiting the meaning that I will receive from it. And because at the end, he said that if you understood the truth of this mystery, then you will understand the meaning of Prophet's ascension. Prophet went through this journey too, he says. And at the end, what he received was pure revelation. Without putting his self, his heart, whatever you can attribute as part of messenger, realization of nothing belongs to me is where revelation starts talking to you. Other than that, revelation will talk to you through a mirror. I think this is the distinction and why the author... So, what shall I take out of this then? Because it looks like he's talking about the ultimate level of the messenger is being described in here with this metaphor. Like for messenger, for the Prophet ﷺ, the example human being, it is possible to open up a window from your roof. Then it becomes, to whatever extent I can become like that. This is the goal to achieve. And getting to there, you put your mirror. And those mirror is going to be limiting what I receive from my creator. And in this example, you can take the speech, since Qur'an is not being mentioned, the message comes from Qur'an, but you can try to understand from Qur'an with your mirror. But Prophet ﷺ did not understand from Qur'an with his mirror. But as the example goes, he opened up a window, meaning everything belongs to him. Everything belongs to him became a state for him. for me, it's just, I mean, I talk about it. I don't implement it. But for the case of the Prophet, it must be the case that from among us, from among humanity, somebody came who were saying that everything belongs to him. This is why that revelation was given to him. And this is the purest message that one can get. And if I would like to walk in the path of Prophet in my journey, like if I would like to walk in the footsteps of Mi'raj of Messenger والسلام, like in his ascension, then I should be saying that whatever I tend to claim, like look at Ali, how good he's kicking the ball. Yeah, this looks like me. I was very good at high school. If I'm saying this, then that means I attributed something to myself. My mirror is getting, it's now becoming a mirror, a static mirror, and whatever comes from my creator is now going to be limited with this. Still, I can observe him playing soccer and say that, look, how beautiful the creator is, making him control his feet and ball and everything. Still, I can praise my creator with this mirror, but it's going to be limited with, because I tainted it with my darkness. I said that it's mine. So I should be able to say, whatever I observe in there, I should be able to say, Subhanallah, MashaAllah. This is why those words, although became part of like Islamic culture, they are very valuable atomic words which express so many meaning. By saying MashaAllah, actually I am cleansing. And I am trying to open up my roof rather than going with this mirror saying that mirror is going to make it limited, but rather go with MashaAllah, it's a Mashi'atullah, it's an act of the creator, not something that the boy inherited from me. So this is how I feel like it's good.
Did you have a question?
I was just thinking.
So let's give you the mic first, and then I will.
I think Dua wanted to.
Go for it.
I mean, I think we discussed in other sessions as well, like something that is not something that happens like not we cannot treat that as mercy, like what's happening in many places in the world, including Gaza, like war, destruction, children are being killed. So how do we relate these into what we are discussing today? Like how, where does it fall in terms of what, which mirror we're gonna consider? Like, is it for me only, or is it like the other one? Thank you.
Let's hold that question, right? Which is a valid, important question. And
I don't have the answer to that.
we'll take your question as well, and then giving people time to think about a response for that, inshallah. This conversation about, the Quran interpreting the world made me think of how it's usually the other way around. Like in real life, I was thinking of politicians and how, you start off by them saying certain things like, oh, I want to create a very equitable world. I want to, we want to spread kindness. And then, a few days later, you'll see like a clip of them going to a church and like feeding people. So it's like, it starts with the speech and then it gets confirmed. It gets confirmed by, action. And I was wondering if the Quran is supposed to be the same way, that instead of the Quran confirming the world or what we see in the world, it's, the world confirming what we read in the Quran, but it doesn't work like that, like you don't go through life and the first thing you learn is revelation. You go through life and you learn to not share. You learn to be stingy with things, and then slowly your parents tell you sharing is caring, like you just give this toy to your brother or whatever.
And it made me think of like when Yusuf Bhai was talking, I was thinking of how it's supposed to be that way though. Like we're supposed to have a not the cleanest mirror to look at the world, because there is an important process that we have to go through, which is of La ilaha illallah. So that is sort of like the design of the whole thing. It's not that, oh, there is God, but rather you're supposed to look at things with that, biased and dirty mirror. And then, revelation will help you, and the speech of God in the sense of the world, or even people coming to you will help you, and you will start to, deny things. So, this can't be, this can't be. So I was just thinking of that process.
So let's go with Brother Birkan and then Abdurrahman.
As you a few minutes ago mentioned, like what we are studying in this fourth principle, the idea is comparison between different speeches, right? Different, let's say, the ideologies or messages. And on one hand, we have revelation Qur'an, and on other hand, the other things, other sources that tells us about our life, humanity, the universe, and so on and so forth. So the way I understand now, the author, so Yusuf mentioned this between two metaphors. Author is saying that you have a message in front of you, or you have an explanation in front of you, or you have an understanding in front of you, like your understanding, for instance. So there are two things the author says. The one thing that from what level, or from that, how would you translate maqam, like the degree? From that from what degree this explanation is coming from? Okay, the first metaphor. Is it coming from just a technician, a handyman who knows about the computers? Or is it coming from the original engineer of the computer, right? The one who makes these computers. Where is it coming from? The explanation, the solution. That's what he's talking about. And then he says in the second example that let's say you want to know about the computers, you want to learn about these Apple computers and so on and so forth. You can say that, okay, I mean, the engineer, the maker of the computer, made all these resources available, like the handbooks and so on and so forth. Or there are other people that I can, to learn from. Also, I can take the computer myself and try to figure out how it works, right? I take the computer, press the buttons. I say, okay, when I press this button, this happened. I press that button, that happens, and so on and so forth. I can try to learn it this way. Now I'm using my mirror in this example. This is my understanding. The computer is there. My life is there. And I'm trying to make sense of my life. And I just use, my senses, my understanding. So I'm using my mirror to understand it. Or I can say that, whatever I do will be just biased. Like it will be biased towards my previous experiences, what kind of education I have, and so on and so forth. So why should I try to learn it, myself or from other people who have also limited understanding? But rather, maybe I should go and talk to this Wozniak guy, the engineer. I should learn it from him. So when I talk to him, the real engineer of the computer, now both the degree is different, but also the way I communicate is different. I say, I don't have enough, the power or understanding or whatever. I don't have it. He knows. So I should ask to him. So you directly talk to the engineer of the computer and ask him how it works. When it comes to your life, you're trying to make sense of your life, and you say, whoever created this life for me, whoever created me, I should ask to him. So that's the, talking to son directly, as I understand. How we do that? In practical life, we know that the prophet achieved that, or achieve, maybe not the right word, but it was given to prophet. The engineer, the Wozniak guy, called him and told him that you look like a great person to learn all this stuff. I will teach you. I will train you specifically, personally. Took him, trained him. That was it. From our perspective, then, I would try to make it as much as possible as a human being, not as a prophet, right? As author says at the end, not even the highest degree of the saint can reach the level of the prophet. Knowing that, I will try to walk on his way. I will say, okay, when I have a problem in my life, I will not try to make sense of it with my own understanding, with my own words, or I will not try to make sense of it by asking a physicist or a psychologist or X or Y, but I will ask the creator. I will open the Quran for that purpose. Or, even better way, I will say, okay, prophet was trained by the engineer, right, personally, and he knew the answers. He applied them in his life, the same life like my life. So I will look at his life. So this is, from my perspective at least, that's how much I can achieve. I cannot talk to the engineer maybe directly myself. He didn't choose me for sure. I mean, I know it myself like a first hand, but at least I can have the attitude. I say, whatever understanding explanation I have, it should be from the engineer. I don't care what other people say, because I will have a lot of people in front of me saying that, Wilkan, I thought about it. I spent all these years studying this and that, and here is my explanation of life. Here is my explanation why you keep having trouble with your children or with your boss. I will say, okay, thank you, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what the creator of this problem tells me. And I will try to find answer there. How? Again, within my capacity. I will look at the Quran, I will look at the life of the prophet, and so on and so forth. But that would be the path, the second path.
I mean, so I think that what I understood is we can actually directly, what Nursi is saying is within the analogy, of course, but we can directly interact with the sun. We can directly communicate with the sun. And I think we can get lost in the example of mirrors, like make your mirror bigger or get rid of the mirror or this and that. But for me, what practically I'm understanding is I can go look at a tree, I can go look at a star, I can go look at a baby, and I can see the names of my creator there. And I can see very beautiful names, but these are always going to be at the level of mirrors. Within the analogy that Nursi is making, no matter how clean I purify my soul or whatever I look at, whatever creation I'm reading, it's always going to be at the level of a mirror. It could be a very pure mirror. It could be a very big mirror. It's still going to be a mirror. But then when I go to the Quran itself, the speech of my creator itself, then it's now the sun. I could see beauty in a tree. I could see beauty in creation and read the names of my creator. I could see the speech, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I understand is I can go read the Quran directly, interact with the Quran directly, and there now I am sitting before the sun within the analogy where everything else was a mirror, but now I'm directly with the sun. And I think this is important because in my life, maybe I could think, it's enough to read Nursi, which again is just a mirror because he's explaining how he saw it. It's enough to just go read creation, look at creation. And I know the Quran is there and we sometimes look at it, but really the Quran, according to Nursi, it's at the level of a sun. It's much better, much more intimate, much more encompassing than everything else. So just a direct interaction with the Quran is above everything else, interacting above everything else in creation. That's how I'm understanding, and just the necessity, importance of going to the Quran. Even amongst like looking at the rest of creation.
Jazakumullah khair. Brother Yusuf, let's end with your comments, inshallah, with your conclusive comments. And I also do want to take a moment to acknowledge your questions, and hopefully maybe they were partially addressed, right? But one thing that came to mind, so I guess I'll say this in parentheses, is that when we think about, we say in salawat, yuhyi wa yumit, right? He is the one that deals life and deals death. So this is how I am knowing, this is how the Quran also acquaints me with my creator. So then when I experience death and I don't like it, how is the one who has created that feeling of dislike and is also creating that event, what guidance can he give me on that, right? And there, that the Quran, I come back to this because for me it's very fundamental. The Quran comes to translate my experience, that situation, what I witnessed, into meaningful speech for me, right? It allows me to read it in his name, read it as something that has mercy, read it as something that is a means to connect to him, is a means to recognize his sustainership over everything. It's a big topic, but that was just one small sentence, inshallah. So the more that we come to understand our relationship with his speech, the varieties of his speech, but also his speech that he gives us through this name or positionality of sustainership of all the worlds, right? Including everything that is being created, everything that is that I am witness, the more that I can try to start to make sense of both the feelings I go through and life events, world events, whatever I might come across as well, inshallah. Brother Yusuf, please, with your comments.
Very beautiful. This is what I was going to say. So just to tie what you said to the metaphor itself then. So if I see those news of Gaza and my heart is just breaking into pieces, and I say, well, I am crying a lot, I am being very sorry, oh Allah, what am I going to do with this? This is very beautiful of self-understanding at this moment. But now we need to take it one step further. So where does this, and that's what Sister Aisha was saying, so where does this heart breaking into pieces come from? Like, is it me being very soft-hearted? Or why am I being so sorry? Where does the sorriness come from? Like, because there's this stone-hearted guy over here. Where does this feeling come from? So I am being given this feeling. So actually me feeling sorry is in itself a speech of my creator saying that I don't like what is going on in there. So what's happening in there is against my mercy. So this is how now it's not me is not being an independent mirror now. Even my feeling becomes his signs, his speech. It's not like out there God says something and now I will understand it. In this sort of a thing, I am this mirror here, and whatever qualities I have is being like static mirrors. But if I take the mirror itself as given by the creator, there's like even the feeling that I say is a creation of him. Now read it as such, read the revelation in this line of thought, then the sorrows, the happinesses, everything will become a news for me. rather than they staying as static tools with which I communicate with the creator. No, they themselves becomes the communication now. I'm not communicating to the creator with a mirror now. Mirror itself becomes part of the conversation. So in practice then, what I'm understanding in here is I should try to apply La ilaha illallah in my conversation with my creator. Meaning, try not to attribute anything to yourself. Because as much as I try attributing things to myself, it is becoming a mirror, and I taint it with colors too. I am a merciful guy. Then within this filter, I get to know the creator. But if I say, no, he is the merciful one, he is the owner of this mercy that I am tasting and everything, nothing in here that belongs to me, then Quran is going to speak different to me. Existence is going to speak different to me. So I think this is, at least from this conversation, what I'm taking to myself, this is where I am failing. This is what I should try to fix in my life. This claiming ownership or painting things with my own color. And this is where the path of prophethood is going to differ from path of philosophy. And it's not black and white. Even when you come to the realm of sainthood and everything, still we keep seeing the traces of it all the way to, because it's a continuous space. On one end is the prophet, on the other hand is Pharaoh. But yeah, everywhere I should blame myself. How much do I claim ownership and take it as a static mirror?
And inshallah, I think that's the end of the 12th word. We've finished the 12th word. So let's maybe continue where we might continue next week. But jazakumullah khair for all your questions, comments. Hopefully we can continue to think about this, continue to be receptive to the speech of the Creator in all its forms, and with priority the Quran. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب